Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a profoundly counterintuitive approach to life's biggest uncertainties. We're drawing our insights directly from Rilke's famous Letters to a Young Poet, specifically Letter 4. And let me tell you, it completely turns our modern obsession with finding the answer entirely on its head. We're doing a deep dive into what it actually means to navigate the unknown, not by running away from it, but by stepping directly into it. But hey, right before we get into it, I want you to pause and really think about that burning question in your own life right now. You know the one. Maybe it's about your career path, a really complex relationship, or even your core identity. It's that nagging uncertainty that you're desperately trying to fix, resolve, or maybe even Google the answer to right this very second. Just hold that question in your mind as we go through today's explainer, because we are going to look at it through a completely different lens. Section 1, the letter that almost wasn't. Let's travel back in time to February 1903. Picture this miserable 19-year-old military cadet named Franz Xaver Capus. He's sitting under a chestnut tree, feeling like his military academy is an absolute prison. He wants to be a poet, but he has no idea if he's any good or what to do with his life. So, on a whim, he reaches out to a 27-year-old stranger living in Paris, the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Capus was totally consumed by doubt about his poetry and his future. Now, back in 1903, the standard response from an older mentor would have been highly prescriptive, right? The era was defined by rigid structures, so elders usually just gave strict, step-by-step career advice, telling a young person exactly what to do to fit in. But Rilke? He didn't just send a brief, polite note back, and he definitely didn't give him a 10-step plan for success. Over the next 5 years, Rilke responded with 10 deeply intimate letters. Together, they total thousands of words, delivering the most demanding, introspective, and honestly unsentimental advice Capus would ever receive about art, suffering, and life. It was a massive departure from the norm. And that brings us to Rilke's central teaching from Letter 4, which ended up outliving both men. Actually, just listen to this. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Live the questions now. He's urging Capus and all of us to stop seeking immediate answers. He literally says the answers can't be given to you right now because you wouldn't be able to live them. Instead, he's asking us to actually love the questions themselves, treat them like locked rooms or books written in a foreign language. Section 2. The counter-cultural key insight. And guys, this is where it gets radically countercultural. You see, we live in a modern civilization that is entirely built on rushing to problem solve. We're trained from childhood to view uncertainty as a temporary failure, like this quick, uncomfortable hallway you just have to sprint through to get to the room of certainty. We treat not knowing as a disease that needs an immediate cure. So most people hear living the questions and think it just means passive patience, like waiting around for the discomfort to end, numbing yourself with your phone, or manufacturing premature answers just to escape the anxiety. But Rilke isn't telling you to wait passively. He's demanding active presence. That means staying completely present inside the unresolved. It means refusing the urge to distract yourself and trusting that genuine answers form slowly in the deep, unconscious parts of our lived experience. It is an intense, active engagement with the unknown. So here's the absolute kicker. The questions are not obstacles on the way to the answers. They are the terrain. You kind of have to move into that messy hallway of uncertainty and, well, furnish it. Put down a rug, hang up some pictures, rather than just frantically looking for the nearest exit sign. You have to learn to breathe underwater, so to speak, rather than panicking and rushing to the surface for a premature and honestly, ultimately unsatisfying resolution. Moving on to Section 3, the roots of living questions. Let's look at how this builds, because Rilke didn't just invent this concept in a vacuum. He was deeply influenced by a long tradition of contemplative thought that recognized the danger of moving too fast. We can actually trace this philosophical lineage directly from a 14th century mystic to a 19th century philosopher straight into Rilke's artistic credo while he was working in Paris alongside the legendary sculptor Auguste Rodin. Rodin taught him to stare at a thing until it revealed itself, rather than forcing an immediate, rushed interpretation onto the stone. And Rilke basically took that artistic patience and applied it directly to human emotion. Specifically, Rilke deeply absorbed this powerful concept called Gelassenheit from Meister Eckhart. It roughly translates to letting be or releasement. It's this profound idea that spiritual and emotional maturity actually comes from releasing the compulsion to grasp and control. Think about it. When you're tense, anxious, and demanding answers from the universe, you're closed off. The compulsion to understand everything right now is often the exact obstacle preventing us from receiving true, lived answers. You simply cannot receive what you are frantically trying to seize. Which leads us nicely into section 4, problems versus mysteries. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, that sounds great for a poet in Paris, but real life requires actual decisions with actual deadlines. I have bills to pay. And you know what? You're absolutely right. This brings us to a really vital distinction from the 20th century philosopher Gabriel Marcel, who was heavily influenced by Rilke. Look, there was a massive difference between a problem and a mystery. A problem is external. It's a puzzle with a solution. Fixing a flat tire, creating a budget, doing math, those are problems. You solve them and you set them aside. Done. But a mystery includes you. It is immersive. Take something like grief or love or your deepest sense of purpose. Those aren't puzzles with a definitive answer key at the back of the book. You cannot solve your identity. You will only exhaust yourself and become profoundly frustrated if you try to treat deep life mysteries as if they are simple external problems. You don't solve a mystery. You step into it. You live it. Section 5. Living the questions today. So, how do we take this incredibly rich, century-old philosophical gold and actually apply it to a regular Tuesday? What does it look like when your inbox is completely full and people are demanding answers? Well, here is what an active practice looks like step by step. In the morning, before you grab your phone to find a distraction, just sit for 5 minutes. Notice the physical feeling of uncertainty in your body. Where does it live? Your chest? Your stomach? Then, at work, when someone pressures you for an immediate stance on something complex, try the radical act of honestly saying, I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out. With your partner, don't just share a packaged, perfectly finished conclusion. Share your vulnerable, unresolved state. Ask them to just be with you in that messy middle. And finally, at night, resist the urge to make a rushed decision just so you can sleep. Let the unresolved question be your companion as you drift off. Because the darkness and quiet of night are usually when our desire for certainty screams the absolute loudest. Section 6. The promise of the unresolved. I know, this sounds incredibly difficult. It pushes against literally every instinct we have to tie things up in a neat little bow. But if you can practice this daily, something breathtaking happens. You stop measuring your life solely by your resolutions, and you completely stop treating uncertainty as a failure state. When you embrace this, that frantic cycle of constantly grasping for answers and the inevitable disappointment that follows, it finally ends. You'll profoundly discover that the reason you've been so exhausted lately isn't actually the question itself. It's your constant draining resistance to the question. When you stop fighting the unresolved, the exhaustion just lifts. Your anxiety transforms into depth, curiosity, and humility. The unknown stops feeling like a 5-alarm fire and becomes, a quiet companion. Rilke captures this whole vibe beautifully in letter 8 with what I think is just an incredible metaphor. He writes, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage." It's such a powerful reminder that everything that frightens us, all our paralyzing doubts, our anxieties, our deepest unknowns, might in their deepest essence just be something helpless asking for our love and attention. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Think back to that burning life question you brought to mind at the start of this explainer. As you step back out into the world, are you going to keep fighting the unknown, exhausting yourself looking for the exit? Or are you ready to finally furnish the hallway, befriend your questions, and simply let them live alongside you? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this profound wisdom.